Okay, good morning, everybody. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I got a couple of requests. Hey, what happens when you burn holes or you destroy metal and you can't fix it? Well, I assume you're talking about some type of sheet metal, whether it's, 14, 18 gauge, whatever it is, or thin walled tube steel or something like that, and you burned a hole through it. I'm going to throw up some pictures. We're going to have a discussion about it. Obviously, if the hole is too big, you're going to have to create like a patch and then basically use your Mig Welder, spot weld it in, grind it down, and so forth. But we're talking about holes primarily that are burn through holes. So let me change up the picture and then we'll go through the questions and the answers. Give me just a second. Okay, so take a look at the picture on the upper left here, and you're still going to burn through things from time to time, no matter how many precautions that you take. But you can be running that Mig Welder too hot, and you might have to turn it down. Now, usually you got a dial for wire speed. You have another dial that'll help you gauge what thickness metal you're welding, but things happen sometimes and you still burn a hole through things. And the question is, hey, what can I do about the hole after I burn it through? And I've got two answers. It kind of depends. Take a look at the picture on the right. Now, this is made out of copper. It's a flat curved piece, and I have one of these and I use it frequently when somebody says, hey, I've got something in the fender well of a car or a trailer. You can hold it with your hand up under there, and then you can sit there and do these little tack welds to cover that hole. Now, what I would do on whether or not it's on an automobile or a flat piece of steel, it doesn't matter right or left. Make sure that you have that temperature, down to the appropriate gauge steel or maybe a little lower. Get your MIG gun down there and then hit the trigger and just zap it. Just a quick flick of the trigger and zap it. And it'll create like this little nubby weld looking thing on there. Let it cool a second and go over to the left. Do it again. Then go to the bottom, let it cool, go to the top, and keep bouncing around until you fill that hole. Now I'm going to take these pictures down and we'll continue the discussion, and I'll try to answer the rest of the questions. Okay, let's take a picture over here on the left. Now you can see, using that simple technique of going right, left, up, down, and you can see where in this case, whoever this was, I pulled these off of the web. I didn't have any real pictures of what I did, but I do it the same way. And you keep bouncing around, and it eventually is going to seal that hole up. Now, on both the front and the back side, I don't know how critical this is. On an automobile or a trailer fender, it's not that critical. But if you're doing something in sculpting or something where it's going to show, you're going to have to get out one of those 4.5-inch flap wheels that I keep talking about. I would hit this real quickly and knock it kind of flat with 80 grit, depending on the thickness of the steel. Then go to 120 or whatever you have, but go to something finer, and you can make this look like it was never even there. And I did this on a buddy of mine's. It was a fender on a car. I don't know what he did to put a hole through it, and he kind of ground it down, played around with it. So yes, weld prepping, whatever you're doing is important. Make sure the metal's clean. And then I did the same thing. I just came up under there with that tool, that copper plated tool, held it there, and in about 5 or 10 minutes, we were done. He took it home, sanded it down, and did what he had to do, but it beats paying, huge auto body shop prices. The picture over on the right, it's the same type of thing. You just work at it. Now, other guys are going to drop in the comment, or they could argue the point. You don't need to wait for it to cool. You can just keep hitting the trigger and zapping it all the way around and fill it in. Now, I suppose you could do that. I have better luck with the way that I do it. I don't say let it cool for a long period of time. I hit it, I wait a few seconds, the metal starts to cool down, and then I'm over on the left and I do it again. I let it cool down a little bit, then I go to the top, the bottom, then I start going in between and bounce around until I create what you see in one of these pictures. And at that point, I just sand it down and I can make it look however I want. Paint it with primer. If I don't like it, I can come back, zap a couple more little zap welds, or it's just like flicking the trigger and just hitting it for a brief moment. And I can fill it in, grind it down, and I can still paint primer, and I can still make it look good. Okay, moving on to the questions. Okay, the first question is saying, how much weld prep do you do? Well, if it's just to fill in holes and stuff, it doesn't matter. I could use a piece of 80 grit, 100 grit sandpaper and just scrub all around the site, and then just quickly start doing these spot welds. I don't spend a lot of time, I guess, but I do make sure the metal is fairly clean, because it's going to give you a better weld. It gives you better penetration. There's lots of pluses to spending a couple of seconds and weld prepping something like this. You're asking me what settings do I use. Now that's hard because you might have, I don't know what kind of a welder you have. You might have one of these really inexpensive, cheap buzz boxes from Harbor Freight, the very low end. I don't mean the higher end ones, the Vulcan and all that. I mean the lower end ones, the real simple, simplistic ones. Now, some of those really cheap ones, I've just seen where there's two switches, like for a high and a low. And I don't know. I don't have one of those. I don't really want to remark on those. I mean, I've got a much better welder. I've got the Miller-Matic 211, and there's lots of good welders out there. But when you're doing holes, we're talking about filling holes. I don't worry about wire speed. I usually have it turned down. I mean, you'll get a feel for it. What's more important is that temperature setting and setting it to the thickness that you're using. Now, the charts on the inside of the better welders are fairly accurate. I'm not going to tell you they're totally accurate. They're not. And yes, I still tweak mine. But I would start off with what their suggestion is. Try it, hit the trigger. If you think it's burning too hot, or again, if it burns another hole, back off on that temperature. Then come back at it again, and you'll very quickly see you're able to hit there and flick that trigger, and it will start to make these little spot welds that I'm telling you. And then eventually you just blend them together by going right, left, up, down, like I was saying. So I hope that answers the question for you. I don't know what you mean by trying to achieve a perfect weld. We're talking about, filling holes. I'm not trying to achieve a perfect weld on filling holes. I'm just trying to fill the hole literally with steel so that I can hit it with my flap disc or whatever I need to do, bring it back down, make it look like it wasn't there. It's like I said, it's usually caused because you're running it too hot or you have spent too much time in one area on a thin gauge steel. And I think we've all done it. It happens. It happens even when you have things set right. But this is the way that I fix it, and I'm just kind of sharing that with you. Okay, it's the same guy commenting like, well, then can you explain to me what you think a perfect weld is? Well, it goes outside of this topic, which is filling, holes that you've burned into steel. But let me throw up a picture and I'll explain. Okay, so this is a good picture I pulled off of the web to show you, and shows you, the pattern, of how a lot of people weld. They do it in these little curly cues or these little E's, or these little circles. I guess it's an E pattern. And this is, my answer to you. I mean, well, what's my idea of a perfect weld? Well, this would be a damn near perfect weld. It looks great. It probably has really good penetration. I wouldn't know. Well, I flipped it over and and took a look at it, but I'm sure he's got good penetration on this. Like I said, a little off topic on filling, burn through holes, but I hope it answers your question. All right, let me throw the pictures back up and we'll continue. How close do I keep the torch when I'm filling these holes? Well, I keep it real close. I mean, I'm just hitting the trigger quickly, and the shielding gas, of course, is, what's shielding around where, the Mig Welder is hitting the metal. So, no, I'm fairly close. It's hard for me to give you a measurement, but I mean, think about it, the farther you're away, the less that shielding gas is helping you, and I use shielding gas, so I think the same thing would hold true for flux cord, but I just prefer shielding gas. Okay, well, you're saying that when you've done this in the past, that the edge of the pool starts to collapse on you, or it starts to pull away and you start having problems. The easiest way to handle that is stop what you're doing, just pause. Give it a few minutes to cool down, then try it again, and you won't have a problem, but I'm sure that that's what's causing your issue. Yeah, I can summarize some of this. If you're doing this and you're having issues, I really believe probably a high percentage of the time, you're not letting those tack welds cool down enough. It doesn't matter how long you let it cool down. I just pause, I just wait, I don't know, a minute or two or whatever it is, and then I go to the left, and then I wait a minute or two, and then I go to the top. You got to give it time to cool down a little bit, and then sometimes on that final hole sealing, when it gets real small finally and I'm ready to seal it, I kind of go back and forth over it. I kind of give it like a little bit of a thickness because I'm not worried about it, because I can take it down fast, with a flap wheel. So they all have their quirks. I mean, when you do this, doing a fender well like I did, that's a little bit tricky, I guess. And you got to play around, but you can do it. And when you grind it down, it'll come, flat like, the original metal, and it looks seamless. If you just take your time, let it cool down. That's, the best thing when you hit this thing like you're tack welding. Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention it. 023, 025, I keep mentioning this in all the videos. It'll work perfectly for this stuff and anything else you're going to do in your shop. I'm not saying you can't do it with 030, but that's, I don't know. It's not my wire of choice when it comes, to sheet metals and stuff like that, because you don't really need that thick of a wire. If you're going to weld 1/4 inch thick stuff, then we're not talking about holes probably. But I mean, like 1/4 inch, I mean, give or take right around there. 030 is good, but for, you know, the shop and everything that I do and artistically and whatever, 023, 025 is just plenty, okay? So all these guys, you know, hitting the table saying by 030, it's a bunch of crap, really. You don't need it. It's not saying you can't use it. You'll find if you use the right wire, your welding is going to turn out to be a lot better. You're going to be a lot more consistent. Just, you know, my advice when you do this, everybody gets carried away with wanting to hurry. You kind of need to tap the brakes a little bit. Slow down what you're doing when it comes to welding. Make sure that you're comfortable. Make sure that you got the right wire. You know, you got wire speed control. If you think it's coming out too fast and that's forcing you to go too fast, then slow it down. Practice your welds and just stay consistent. And you'll find in a very, very short period of time, and I mean very short period of time, you can take a look at what you originally did versus one you did like 2 hours later, like I mentioned in another video. You're going to see a huge improvement just by understanding and how to use these, the controls on your Mig Welder. Okay, that's it. I hope you folks enjoyed the video, and I hope you stay with me and click subscribe. I'm still pushing that YouTube stuff, the requirements. All right, thanks. I will see you on the next video when we cross another topic. You folks have a good day. Bye-bye.